So we all know how much a glide bait plays in today's industry, but it can be a little daunting when you think about all the specialized gear and the big baits and how expensive the baits can be. But what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna break down the perfect introductory glide bait for those of you guys that are thinking about getting into it, because for this bait, you don't need a specialized setup, you don't need a specialized reel. All you need is a certain jig rod that you have, or your favorite medium heavy or heavy flipping stick, and we can work through how to fish this puppy and how to get some more bites and some bigger bites than you wouldn't have gotten without throwing one of these. So stick around. You guys are not going to want to miss this video.
So the cool part about throwing this glide bait is that you don't really need specialized gear like I had talked about. I just have, again, that 7.3 medium mag heavy by Arc Essence. It's basically just my favorite offshore jig rod. And what I like is that it's a 7.3, so I can still target cast around docks, around certain objects without being like way out there, and my accuracy is still there. And so again, with that bait only being 6 inches, it's actually fairly light. And so again, my accuracy is not changing because I'm not all of a sudden throwing some crazy heavy bait. It's actually a pretty small bait when you look at it. And so what I really like to do with this bait this time of year is I'm gonna go up to those key pieces of cover that we have. We have a point right here with a big metal wall on it. And I'm gonna walk you through how I go about working this bait. And so again, I'm just gonna lob a cast over there, try to get it as close as you can. I'm gonna get that line tight, and then I'm just gonna do a slow reel, throwing in a twitch every now and then, because that bait's gonna walk side to side, and you don't want it to cut back and forth real hard until I get a fish really interested in it. And so I'll just throw in a key twitch here and there to get that bait to do something different. You can throw in some twitches. And what you wanna know about using this bait is when you make a cast, if you do a slow reel, that bait is gonna S-wave the whole way in. If you throw a twitch in my reel like that, it's gonna cut out to the side hard. And so if you twitch it back and forth, that's gonna get it to cut side to side real hard. And that's what I like to do when I get around a dock or I get around a piece of cover where I know that fish is gonna be sitting on that piece of cover. But if I'm covering water, what I like to do is I will just do a slow reel and throw in a twitch every now and then, because I try to imagine that a fish is following that, and that twitch is just gonna really get that fish to trigger on it. But as soon as I get around a piece of cover, I'll throw in some twitches, and I can even pause it a little bit. And it's just gonna get that bait to dance back and forth. And the fish are gonna be varied on the retrieve, and it's gonna depend on what retrieve the fish are active with. So you're gonna have to mix in certain things to try to get those fish to fire, but it's ultimately gonna depend on what the fish you're fishing for that particular day want. Sometimes they want it really slow. Like sometimes my retrieve is just kick, 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 just to get that bait to go side to side, because if they're really cold, they might not want it real fast. But sometimes you might have to burn it and pause it and get that bait to really be cutting really fast just to get those fish to trigger on it. So you really just have to play with the retrieve to figure out what those fish are really going to be keying in on for that particular day. And so again, colder water, I like a little bit slower, getting it to kick a little bit more. Faster, warmer the water gets. But those are the retrieves that I'm really gonna use with that bait. And you can even throw your rod in a little bit. I try not to. You can really twitch it if you really wanna get some hard twitches in there to get that bait to cut side to side real hard. But then your hook set is just gonna be a sweeping hook set to the side. Because those treble hooks are on the bottom, you don't wanna be setting the hook up, because that's gonna pull it up. And most of the time, you're just gonna feel that bite as like the weight is gonna be there. You're gonna go to twitch it and there's just gonna be a fish on there. And so you'll twitch it, and then just load up. And that's gonna be pretty much how this goes.
So what makes throwing a smaller glide bait like this 6-inch so successful is that you can throw it around all the targets that you love to throw, because it's a fairly light bait, and you can throw it on your favorite gear, which I will have linked below the gear that I like. But I like a 7.3 medium mag heavy Arc Essence, and that 7.3 allows me to be accurate with my casts, allows me to throw it in all those hard to reach places, around docks, around grass clumps, all those high places where those fish are going to be really keyed in on. All those places where there's the really high opportunity of there being a big fish. That's what makes it so easy to throw this bait, and what makes it so successful is because you can put it in all those places so easily. So one thing that everybody stresses about when they're throwing a smaller glide bait like that small 6 cents draw or like this Spro KGB shad is the action of the bait. How are you supposed to work the bait? Well, when you're throwing smaller glide baits like this, like that 7 and less, a lot of times what you have with these short jointed baits is a chopping action back and forth. And so you get that back and forth action almost like you're using a walking topwater bait. And so what that's really good for is that's good at throwing it around cover, whether that be shallow brush, working it like a topwater bait over top of shallow bars, working it over grass beds, or working it around docks. And the reason that I like those shorter glide baits, because that action is so easy to impart into the bait. It's not like a real natural gliding action where you're really trying to get that slow, methodical glide where the fish are really inspecting it. It's very easy for new people to throw this glide bait because you're doing a slow chopping action to get that bait to work back and forth. It's working really fast, and you get some really aggressive strikes on it, which is also super key because the harder they hit it, the better they're going to get hooked a lot of times. And so that makes it easier for you if you don't have necessarily the right terminal tackle on the bait to land those fish, which is why I recommend starting off with these smaller glide baits, again, because the gear doesn't have to be as refined and as perfect as somebody that, say, like Ben Milliken throwing $700 glide baits. No, you're throwing a $50 to $70 bait where if you break it off, it's not the end of the world. Now, why do you want to throw a bait like this? Because we're in the pre-spawn or in the post-spawn, depending on where you're at, whether you're up north or whether you're down in Florida, those fish are setting up on key pieces of cover. And a lot of times, a lot of you guys aren't on giant expansive bodies of water where there's 50,000 key pieces of cover, right? There might only be 50 docks with points or 50 points with docks on them on your lake. And so if you get the same 5 guys that go to your lake all the time or the same 30 guys that fish your lake all the time, running those points over and over and over again, those fish are going to get beat to death with Senkos, jigs, chatterbaits, and spinnerbaits, swim baits, that kind of thing. And so giving them something with a different look is where this time of year really, really plays, because those big fish are up shallow and they're setting up on predictable places. And so if you can go to those predictable places and throw a bait that they're not expecting to see, that's going to give you a leg up on the competition, especially if it's not breaking the bank with you being able to throw it on your favorite gear. So now I'll kind of show you how I set up a glide bait like this one, because if you'll notice, it's not standard, right? I have weights underneath it here. This bait suspends right off the bat, so it's not gonna sink very fast. And so what I like to do is I like to put these suspend strips on the bottom of this bait to allow that bait to sink a little bit more. So that way I can fish it a little bit deeper around key pieces of cover. You know, it works great in that 0 to 5 foot range, but once you get over that 5 foot, I like to put something a little bit more to get that bait to sink a little bit more. And you can put more suspend strips on there. Another thing that I like to do is I'll actually put a small drop shot weight on the O-ring of the front hook, so that way it will weight that bait down and cause it to dive a little bit, which is really, really cool. But that's kind of the things that I like to do with this bait. I'm throwing it on 20-pound fluorocarbon, your normal size line on there. And I'm pairing that with a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. So it's your basic setup. There's nothing crazy. You could cut off a jig and then tie this bait on, which is why I like to throw it so much. So because you can just pick up a jig rod and tie it on there, this is a bait that I like to keep on deck for those key pieces of cover. And I also like to use it when it's flat, calm like this to locate fish. Because it's easily accessible to be able to put it in tight to reach places, if I'm pre-fishing for an event, or if I'm just trying to figure out where the heck those fish are actually staging up at, this is a great bait to draw those fish out. Because they don't hear it coming, you know, it has a little bit of a rattle in it, but they don't hear it or feel it like a chatterbait or a spinnerbait. It catches their attention more because it's a more visual bait. And so they tend to follow it more, which is better for me and you because we can actually see those fish then. And I might not even catch them on this bait, but I'll go back through with a wacky rig or a jig, one of my actual favorite baits, but I can cover water a lot faster with this bait and really get a chance to see where those fish are living at with this bait. What this is also going to do is it's also going to give you the highest percentage chance at getting the biggest fish to come out right away. Again, because it's not something they hear or feel very often, like a chatterbait or a spinnerbait or a big swim bait, they're going to have a better chance to trick those bigger fish because it's a bigger profile meal. And so oftentimes you'll get the biggest fish in the school to come out and check it out right away because it looks like a sizable something they might want to eat. You know, big fish oftentimes aren't going after a lot of smaller meals. They're eating once a day, maybe once every 2 days, because they're eating bigger size baits and then they just hang out. That's why they seem so lethargic all the time. It's because when they do eat, they're going after big baits. You know, they're going after big bluegill, big gizzard shad, something like that, where then they can eat once and then relax. And so this is one of those meals that looks like one of those bigger meals that they can eat once and then relax. And so that's why I really like to break it out, because even up here in the north, those bigger fish, even those bluegill eaters, will still come out and check out a glide bait like this one, because it just piques their interest and it's a different look than they don't see, because we don't have a lot of people throwing glide baits up here in the north like we do, and most of your recreational guys aren't throwing glide baits. So if you live on a very pressured lake, this is going to be something that I really like to throw. It's a great dock bait because, again, that smaller size, I can throw it up around docks. I like throwing it around laydowns because I can pull those fish up out of those laydowns. Brush piles, I will weight it like I talked about to be able to sink it over top of those brush piles to give it a different look. But the key is you have to have the right weather for it. And so today we have the wind for it. And so that little bit of chop is giving those fish the lack of visibility to eat this bait. If you have glass calm conditions, they're not going to eat this bait. So that's something to keep in mind. This is a bait that I like to break out when you get overcast and or wind. Something that's going to break up that surface tension a little bit. But it is a bait that is going to change the way you fish a glide bait, just because it's going to be that introductory size that everybody, you know, likes to have in their back pocket. It's going to give you the comfort to throw it and allow you to open the door into the glide bait world and be a little bit more comfortable with it and hopefully expand it a little bit. It's a fun way to fish. You can see how chewed up this bait is. We've been getting smallmouth to absolutely smash this bait today. And so it's just a nice window into the sport to get into something that's a little bit different. So if you like today's video and you guys enjoy the content, hit that subscribe button to follow along for more. But God bless every single one of you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.